Both the strategies and the argument for women's suffrage came under siege from a new generation in 1912. Norse's leadership insisted that to get the vote, women needed to acknowledge and respect the traditions of 19th century domesticity. They recognized an obligation to the generation of 1848 and expected that the campaign for suffrage would respect the values of domesticity and the home. Younger women often disagreed. For them, the idea of decorous or domestic womanhood was anathema. Products of the dawning age of modernity, they were committed to individual satisfaction, free of family or community sanction, and eager to demonstrate sexual autonomy. In an effort to rebel against their parents' generation, they dismissed motherhood as the primary calling of women, refusing as well the argument that motherhood gave them a different outlook on the polity. The vote for them was a matter of simple justice. They did not wish to attract women to their side by persuasion. Instead, they insisted protests and demonstrations would turn the public in their favor. The historian who searches will have no trouble finding multiple, sometimes competing identities in play. Educated white women sought the vote to create a woman's voice in the polity, one that spoke for home and motherhood. Immigrant and poor women joined the campaign because the vote would enable them to change the conditions of their workplaces. They desired to equalize conditions in order to be able to support their families. African American women, who identified both as African Americans and as women, sought both acknowledgement of their participation in the polity and a platform from which to improve the conditions of the race. Mary Church Terrell, for example, made a strong argument for women's suffrage in order to oppose Jim Crow-type legislation, North and South. At the same time, African American women noticed that especially in the South, white women feared that admitting poor black women to the suffrage would eventually undermine women's moral arguments for the vote. African American women, therefore, needed the vote for very different reasons. Unsurprisingly, they also noticed that college-educated white women kept their distance from black women. They feared that the vote would do nothing to close the distance between the races. Tensions among women resulted in mixed and complicated strategies. Black and white women joined in occasional demonstrations and meetings. At other times, white organized marches for women's suffrage incorporated African American women and then relegated them to the back of the march. At other marches, African American women protested loudly enough to prevail. They marched along with the whites. But these pragmatic compromises meant that the relationships among different kinds of women produced an escalating tension whose consequences became apparent only after the vote was won. The heated New York State campaign for the vote revealed many of these elements of tension and conflict. An initial constitutional referendum failed in 1915. The second referendum in 1917 resulted in victory for women. Louise Bernekow, who's been studying the New York suffrage movement for more than a generation, will tell us something about the campaign.